Weirdly colored, one-eyed, muscly, 3 meters tall, half-naked monsters with huge fangs and horns. That's not really what we see in Demon Slayer. Did you know that the demons from Demon Slayer are not really demons? In the anime, the demons come in all shapes and sizes. Literally, in all shapes and sizes, and it seems like they are just a fantasy creation of the author. It's a shonen series at the end of the day that doesn't have to be in line with any already pre-existing standards when it comes to the creatures they use, but the demons are still based off of real, very old lore that's been passed down through generations for centuries. A lore that is still very much alive in Japan to this day, so let's see how the demons from the show compare to that. In the show, the demons are nocturnal creatures, feeding on humans, afraid of the sun, and they can only be killed by chopping their heads off. Spoiler alert, the first demon was created in Heian period when Muzan was undergoing an experimental treatment to heal him from an illness that went terribly wrong and turned him into the first ever demon. After all that, he started making more and more demons like him by turning humans into them in order to find a cure to his problem with the sun. That's how it's presented in the anime, but it doesn't fit perfectly to the actual lore about Oni from Japanese mythology / folklore, so let me tell you a bit about that now. The word Oni can be translated into a demon, but it could also mean an ogre, orc, or a troll. They are not uniform, every Oni can look a bit different, so that part the show could write. Typically, however, the demons are of very tall stature, with a skin of unnatural color, most commonly blue, black, yellow, or red. Oftentimes they have horns, huge teeth, unusual amount of eyes and/or fingers. They are often depicted half-naked, wearing loincloths of animal skin and bearing big iron war clubs. They are also inhumanly strong and sometimes possess some superpowers. They tend to live in secluded areas like mountains, but I have not found any details about them being afraid or harmed by the sun. Most of the tales about Oni show them being predominantly male, but there are some instances of female Oni as well. They are just not as common. They are also said to be able to disguise and change their appearance to trick people, which is actually present in the show as well, as Muzan is shown to be able to do just that. Change his appearance at will, to hide himself within society and use people around him. Apart from the stories of demons causing people harm or feeding on their flesh, there are actually also some tales on the demons trying to befriend people and help them. The show also portrays this by including Tamayo and Yoshiro's storyline. Such stories, however, are the minority, and generally the demons are thought to be the representation of negation of humanity. They are anti-human beings, representing everything that is immoral and antisocial, all that people shouldn't be. They are also often understood as a symbol of fear of the other, for example, from another communal culture. First depictions and mentions of Oni started appearing around the 8th century, and by the time of Heian period they already were a common occurrence in many short stories called setsuwa. The word itself means spoken story, so it is believed that some of those first tales were passed down orally for generations beforehand, and only afterwards were written down. Later they evolved into an actual literary genre and were being written down until around the 14th century. Setsuwa consists of legends, myths, folk tales, and anecdotes, typically containing some moral that the author wanted to present to the reader. A few of those stories are present in the first Japanese chronicle called Kojiki, which is considered a semi-historically accurate text showcasing the mythical creation of Japan and the first few hundred years of Japanese history, some of which were historical facts mixed in with pure myths and legends. Another example of a compilation of just setsuwa would be Konjaku Monogatari, which contained many stories showing people's encounters with Oni. That collection was written down somewhere around the 12th century, so by the end of the Heian period, which was actually also around the time that Muzan was born. So, thanks to those stories, we know how people in the real world imagined the demons to look like around the same time when Muzan in the show was said to be turned into the first ever demon. Apart from the written folk tales, the concept of a demon was also very present in Buddhism. Buddhism is also sometimes believed to be the source of those legends about Oni altogether. Japan has two main religions: native to Japan Shintoism and imported Buddhism. Both of them were already coexisting during the Heian period when the tales about Oni were being written down. Both religions still exist in Japan and are mostly practiced simultaneously, so some beliefs from one over time naturally seeped into the other, to the point where it's sometimes hard to tell for sure where a legend really originated from. That is basically what happened with Oni. Most common theory is that at first they were monsters from Buddhism that came from India to Japan through China and Korea, changing its shape along along the way. Then they will ultimately combine with already pre-existing Shinto beliefs and created a newish creature that is not only connected to Buddhism, but was also taken in by the local folklore. There are a few figures within mainland Buddhism that might have given Japanese Oni their final form. One of them is said to be a Hindu creature called Rakshas. By looking at depictions of them, I think the resemblance is there, especially in the unnatural skin color. Those demons were human flesh-eating monsters, hunting after dark and symbolizing evil, so basically they had the same or very similar role as Oni in Japan and share some similarities with Oni from Demon Slayer as well. However, my personal vote as to what inspired the demons from the show would go to a different creature. Not an Oni or Rakshas, but a creature called Preta that came from Hindu Buddhism, just like Rakshas. It is theorized that those monsters might have been one of the inspirations for Oni in Japanese folklore. However, they also exist separately as its own thing apart from Oni. Preta are actually known in various places in Asia under different names, but the most common meaning of all of those names would be hungry ghosts. The stories about them traveled through Asia, and even though eventually they started appearing in many different places under different names, they ultimately were all representing the same idea. A creature previously a human being who, due to their corrupted, greedy, jealous and evil nature, was punished to centuries of suffering through hunger and thirst. Typically they would be cursed to feel immense hunger for a specific thing or an object. In most cases it would be something humiliating like feces or corpses. Hindu myths about Preta later traveled to China, where they most probably got mixed in with some already existing Chinese beliefs and turned into vengeful spirits called
Ugly.
Then with the spread of Buddhism, those spirits eventually ended up in Japan and took a name Gaki. As I said before, while Gaki might have been an inspiration or a predecessor of Oni, it doesn't mean that one replaced the other, as they both still coexist in Japanese mythology. In Japanese, just like in Hindu Buddhism, Gaki are spirits of people who lived very sinful, deceitful or even straight out evil lives. After death, they got punished for their actions by being cursed with an immense feeling of hunger. In most cases, they are said to crave the flesh of corpses, and so each night they go out to hunt for them in an attempt to satisfy their never-ending hunger. Which is basically the same thing that we see in the show, apart from the fact that in the show they are hunting for live prey. A depiction of Gaki can be seen today in Kyoto National Museum, where you can find a scroll showing how people imagine them to look like. Horrifyingly skinny, yet with big bellies, skin and hair sometimes in an unusual color and with grotesque faces. They don't really have all the attributes we associate with Oni that I described earlier. The biggest difference we can see is in their posture, which when it comes to Oni should be towering over humans. Gakis are not really that big. Gaki also lack huge fangs or horns. However, the resemblance between hungry spirits and demons is still somewhat there, mainly in the horrifying faces and their attire, or more specifically, lack of it. In case of Oni from Kimetsu no Yaiba, I see more of a resemblance to Gaki in them rather than the typical folklore-accurate Oni. None of the demons in the show have the required giant posture. They do sometimes have unusual skin colors, but not nearly often enough. They don't dress accordingly to the myths, and don't bear the huge clubs the demons in myths do. Oni are actually also not really said to be nocturnal creatures. At least I wasn't able to find any mentions of them appearing only at night. The nocturnal aspect is mentioned when it comes to Gaki and Hindu Rakshas though, so again the resemblance to Gaki rather than Oni is more apparent here. Also, Oni are not former humans turned into demons like Gaki and demons from the show are. They always were demons and never had any human form beforehand, so this aspect of the show also fits hungry ghosts more. To complicate it a little bit, let's also see what aspects of demons from the show don't fit with the description of hungry ghosts. First of all, as I said before, there are some stories mentioning Oni being favorable towards humans, just like Tamayo was in the anime. This would be the point against Gaki, since there are no stories like that when it comes to those spirits. Hungry ghosts are also not able to change their forms to full humans. Their pitiful appearance is a part of their punishment, so they are never able to change that. So this is a power that only Oni are said to hold. As for any other type of superpowers or inhuman strength, it is also something only mentioned in regards to Oni, not Gaki, so it seems like in the show we get a little bit of a mix of both creatures. The best example of a character not fitting that well into the typical folklore Oni mold would be Gyutaro, who definitely takes more from the hungry ghost myth rather than the demon one. He doesn't have horns, his skin is just ashy in color, not really that unusual to resemble a demon, and his gaunt look fits more into the Gaki description as well. Looking at both Gaki and Gyutaro side by side, you can really see the similarities more than when you compare him to the typical depiction of Oni. Generally, in the character design, the elements from the traditional Oni that Demon Slayer usually uses would be unusual skin color for some of the characters, occasional horns, big and sharp fangs, and the unusual amount of eyes. To me, it looks like for most demon characters, the features of demons and hungry ghosts were mixed when designing their appearance. Weirdly enough, one demon that is checking a lot more of demon and not Gaki boxes is Nezuko. When in battle, she grows in size and can get unusually big. She also exhibits unhuman strength, which are both points in favor for Oni inspiration. Then she can also grow one horn, also another point for Oni. Apart from that, if we look at an example of a mask used in Japanese traditional theater that were meant to depict an angry female Oni, we can see some resemblance to what Nezuko looks like when she is pissed and in the fight mode. The masks are called Hanya and generally feature a very angry expression, horns, and big fangs. To complete this comparison though, we need to also talk about one of the most important aspects of the show. How do you actually slay a demon? The answer is actually pretty easy. We would do that the same way we would in the show, by cutting the head off. So this aspect of Demon Slayer, I would say, is pretty much accurate to the Oni lore, and not really connected to Gaki in this case. Legends talking about how to slay a demon also appeared more or less in the same time period as Muzan was born in the show. The practice has its own name, and lots of history behind it as well. It is called kubizuka, literally meaning neck mount, and it was not originally reserved for demons. It was actually a wartime way of proving that someone succeeded in ending an enemy, so originally it was meant for people, not supernatural beings of any kind. There are many historical burial sites where allegedly some historical figures' heads are buried. Kubizuka was a practice meant for humans during wartime, but according to a legend it was also used on demons, but not so much to show some higher up that the enemy was ended successfully, but more to prevent a chance that the demon would put itself back together and start tormenting humans again. It is said that the events from the exact legend took place at a shrine called Kubizuka Daimyonjin, which is said to be a resting place of a head of a very dangerous demon called Shutendoji. He was a demon leader of an Oni gang that was causing havoc and kidnapping young women in Kyoto during Heian period. To make a stop to that, an emperor ordered a nobleman and at the same time a military man, Minamoto no Yorimitsu, to take care of the demons. When it was discovered that Shutendoji and his minions were responsible for the disappearings, Minamoto found the gang and eventually, with the help of a little poisoning, he decapitated the Oni leader. However, the head was still violent even afterwards and tried to bite off Minamoto's head in revenge. The warrior survived though, due to multiple helmets he was wearing just as a precaution. Now, the head is said to have been buried on the grounds of the Kubizaka shrine on the mountain a little bit outside of Kyoto, where the demons' hiding grounds were located according to the legend. So, are demons from Demon Slayer actually demons? In my opinion, only partially. If we look at the folklore descriptions and attributes of Oni, they fit some of them, but don't fit all. I would say that the author definitely took inspirations from legends about demons and combined them with lesser-known Gaki to make the character more human and appealing or interesting to watch for the audience. If they just took an evil monster that is evil for the sake of being evil, the show would not have had enough nuance to be interesting or for us to care for the characters. Even though they are doing bad things, at the end of the day, we still get invested in bad guys' stories due to this human element that is still within them. If they were just a folklore-accurate demons, we would lose that factor and as a consequence a lot of depth from the show, and it probably wouldn't be as popular as it is today, since the villains being evil just because doesn't really fly anymore.